Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Welcome again to one more live streaming here at FCP.co. My name is Felipe, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy this discussion. Yesterday, Apple had this amazing event, their keynote from September, normally where we see new iPhones. And yes, we saw iPhone 11, 11 Plus, 11, 11 Pro, and 11 Pro Max. Yeah, that's quite a mouthful. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about what is the impact of that into filmmaking, because we saw some amazing stuff coming from those iPhones. And together with me here, I have two special guests. First, we have Photo Joseph. Hey, how are you?
Greetings, sir. I'm doing very well. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Can you tell people a little bit about what you do? We see that you have your YouTube channel there, and give just a little bit of background story for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Photo Joseph is the name. I'm a photographer, filmmaker, content creator, a YouTuber, youtube.com/PhotoJoseph. I do software training at photojoseph.com. That's all tied through YouTube, do client work, and have training on lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we also have with us Gabriel Spalding from Milwaukee. Hey, Gabriel, how are you?
I'm good, Felipe. How are you doing?
Great. Can you also give us a little bit of background there on you and what you do and etc.?
Yeah, I run a small video production company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I also run an online show about video production with you called Get a Grip. And I am working on becoming a filmmaker. I haven't made a film for 14 years, and it's time.
All right, it's time then. Yesterday's event, what were your feelings about yesterday? I mean, how do you feel? Because a lot of people, when it comes to Apple, it's all about feeling, right? Oh, people are very emotional about Apple. Joseph, how was it for you? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I would have loved to have been surprised more. There were a couple surprises, and I know the things we're going to talk about today, but it's sad that we're in a time of so many leaks that you just know basically everything before the show starts, and that's a bummer because I loved the days of being actually genuinely surprised. But but that part of it aside, the new announcements are great, and obviously the iPhone, which we're going to be talking about, is pretty fantastic, pretty interesting camera.
Yeah, and even if you want to try to avoid those leaks, you would have to stop reading the internet for the previous 3 months ahead, or maybe even
least,
6 months. It's crazy. What about you, Gabriel? Did you watch the keynote?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing. Again, we'll talk about the phone stuff shortly. The thing that grabbed me was, for the first time, I was interested in getting an Apple Watch.
Oh.
I think the way they spun it, the marketing should just say, if you don't want to die, buy an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
And that's good enough for me.
And guys, if you don't know, FCP.co, this channel, we're trying to start doing a lot of live streams and put some content here, maybe every week or every 2 weeks or something like this. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like. And tomorrow there will be a great article from Sam Messman on FCP.co about a lot of Apple products, and it's basically a guide for you that if you work with filmmaking, those are the things that you should keep in mind of. So go read this article tomorrow on fcp.co. Now, we also have here a few people watching that already said hi, and I really wish that I wouldn't murder anyone's name, but I think it's gonna happen. So it's either Terje or Terje. I think it's Terje Rokenes. Hello there. I think you might be Finnish. Let me try that. Alex Goner, as always, thank you very much for being there, Alex. And there is another one that I'm not sure. Guy, I think it's a French name, so it might be Guy Desmarais, or sorry, I'm so sorry that I'm murdering your name, but you know who you are. KB. Welcome, thank you very much. He's working from home and watching, and let's start this. Joseph, you are a photographer by trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
what do you think about these last couple of years that we have a lot of one thing that's called computational photography, and on Apple's side, we see that in the way of smart HDR. Can you give us a little bit of backstory or what people should know about computational photography, just so we can preface the whole conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the term of computational photography essentially means that there is a lot of computations, to use the literal word, happening inside of the camera, in this case inside of the phone, before you see the file. So it's essentially a ton of post-processing, but also pre-processing that is happening at the moment that you take a picture. And so on the simple end of things, post-processing example would be HDR, where the camera takes 3 photos or maybe even more than that, virtually at the same time within microseconds of each other, blends them together to give us let's call it an impossible exposure, something that has much more dynamic range than the camera could have on its own. That's a very simple version of it, but the latest generations of computational photography are doing a lot more. You know, what we saw in the iPhone 11 is it's pre-shooting shorter exposures and then shooting longer exposures and essentially choosing the best pixels out of those to blend them together into a complete photo that is frankly something that you could only get with a traditional camera with a lot of Photoshop work and a lot of skill.
Well, yeah, and this is the part that it's just available to people as they just step their finger on the shutter button there on their camera application.
Yeah.
Which iPhone do you have at the moment?
I have the 10, the first iPhone 10.
The 10. Do you use a lot the Smart HDR?
Well, it's just on, right? I have it on auto, so it triggers itself sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. It's pretty rare that I'll go and turn it off. The stuff that I'm shooting with the iPhone, I just want it to be easy and to look good, and for the most part it does, so I just leave it alone.
Okay, great. So, Gabriel, we talk a little bit back and forth on Get a Grip about cinematography in general, and we've talked a lot about equipment, and we've talked a lot about so many things that go around this. And very big first question here of this live streaming, and we're going to start this discussion is, can we even call filmmaking something that's coming out of a phone? So let's, this discussion can literally go on for 12 hours, but let's see what we can do in a few minutes here. So let's start with Gabriel. Can we call it filmmaking?
I think if someone chooses not to call it filmmaking, I think it's a problem of ego. Now, I have spent a lot of money over the years building up a little mini movie studio, and I have pride in that, and it's based on, a century of filmmaking techniques that guided me in one direction, one path. And nowadays, though, we have all these new tools, and people are going to be using the new tools. So I feel like the part of me that feels threatened by people using an iPhone instead of, say, a cinema camera is just my ego. And I'm trying to be very mindful of that.
But would you see yourself, for example, choosing to use a phone to do a short film, for example?
I personally have zero interest in that. I don't. It's not something, if I can currently grab my pocket cinema camera over my phone, I'm going to grab the pocket cinema camera. Now, when it comes to photography, because I don't do photography professionally, I'm going to grab my phone. And I think that's emblematic of an important shift that's happened. 10 years ago, how many people carried around a stills camera? Like nobody. But now everybody carries around a phone. So everybody's taking pictures, and they're also starting to take more video. And so that lends itself to video literacy in general. But I think what's also going to happen is certain clients are going to find that the video quality or photo quality from a phone is good enough for what they do, and they'll hire those people.
Okay, so in that subject, Joseph, how can they even know if the quality of the phone is enough? You as a photographer, you're telling them, oh, I'm using a Canon 5D Mark IV, or I'm using this other camera, or they're more interested in the end result?
Well, any client who's interested in what camera you're shooting with is not a client you want. I've actually turned clients down for that before, where they got into a discussion of what brand lights I was using, and I'm like, I don't think I'm the right fit for you. I don't want to have that discussion. I want to use the right tool for the job. And if the right tool happens to be an iPhone, because it allows me to do things that a larger camera would not, then that's what I'm going to use. It's not something that I would typically plan to use on a commercial shoot, but if it worked out, if it's something that I needed, I got no problem using that. I don't care what the camera is as long as it gives me what I want.
Okay, I think from the three of us, if we are given a choice, so we have a client or we are doing a project for ourselves, if we've given the choice, the three of us, we're going to go for an actual camera with actual lenses to do a film or whatever video that we're doing. But okay, let's remove that choice, because in a lot of ways, and I keep on hearing that from Sam, for example, and Sam, he teaches a course of mobile filmmaking to teenagers, and it's incredible that we have these amazing things in our pockets that makes videos that 10 years ago, you would need so much money to make videos on this quality. So if we remove the cameras, let's say that you went on a vacation somewhere and you said, oh, this vacation I want to travel light, but then you're in this paradisiac place and it's just so beautiful. And there is no way that you're not going to make a film about it because it's just so beautiful. Do you take that challenge and getting your phone, or are you going to sob and say, oh, I don't have my camera on? Joseph, would you do?
Oh, yeah, of course I'd shoot with the phone. Yeah, absolutely. It's the old adage that the best camera in the world is the one you have with you, right? And if you have a camera, then you have no excuse to not shoot if there's something that you want to shoot. Obviously, there are limitations, right? Of course, you can't change lenses. And, okay, now with the new iPhone, you have 3 lenses built in. That's pretty cool. You're not going to get the super shallow depth of field. You don't have the level of focus control. There's a lot of things that you don't have. But that goes back to this idea of you can complain all day long, oh, I don't have this piece of gear, so I can't shoot that. Oh, I could have got that shot, but I didn't have that piece of gear with me. Please, if you're any good at what you do, you make the best with the tools that you have. And if the tool happens to just be an iPhone, you use it. Hey, if I've got an S1H and a slider and a gimbal and a drone and all these other things, then I can use those and I can do things that I couldn't do just with the iPhone. But that doesn't stop me from making a film or telling a story. That's just an excuse.
When I started out, I had a little camcorder. There was a fixed lens. It could only record 60p. That's all I could do. And while I could not come close to achieving the quality I can now, it got me clients. Those clients paid me. That money got the next camera. So yeah, and I would argue the new iPhone is much better than the camera I started out with.
Oh God, yeah.
Okay, but I think Joseph, you said, oh, you can't control focus properly, and then we lose that creamy bokeh-licious depth of field there. But and I think nowadays we are associating a lot of those things with cinematic, right? But when we go back to Apple's event and we see the videos that they shot with the phone, does anyone argue against that they didn't look cinematic besides the frame rate?
Sure. Oh, I mean, they looked fantastic, right? And I've had this discussion recently on my channel, someone commenting about, I'm looking at this camera, but it doesn't do 24p, and I want to have my footage look cinematic. I'm like, dude, frame rate is not what makes your footage look cinematic. Lighting, directing, good actors, good set, that's what makes it look cinematic. Just because you go from 30 to 24p, do you really think 6 frames is going to turn you into Coppola? Please. It's not about the frame rate. Yes, that gives a particular look that people who know what they're looking for will recognize. Most people haven't got a clue. And it's not frame rate that's going to make it cinematic. So, and you know what? If you're shooting with Filmic Pro, you can shoot at 24p on the iPhone.
Yeah. And Gabriel, what about this challenge for you? Like, let's say we're going to the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit in the end of the year. And I think we kind of agreed that we are not taking cameras and we're going to just enjoy, but I'm pretty sure that there will be several occasions in which we're going to say, wow, we should be filming this. Would you, if I say, let's try to make a short film and we only have the phones, how would you take that challenge?
I would get on a plane and just go back home. No, yeah, we would use the phones, and I think that's probably what we're going to be doing.
Yeah. Okay. Want to say a quick hello here to everyone that has joined here. Ashok from Bangalore. He's saying, glad you guys are doing this and thanks for all the great work you guys have always done. Thank you very much. And of course, these two guys here, Gabriel and Joseph, they also have amazing stuff that you guys should check it out. Definitely subscribe to the channels. It's in the description there. Eugene, as always, my friend, very nice to have you here. And I'll see you at IBC. And then we have Bijlesh. Sorry, man, if I'm muttering your name there. And of course, we have Photo Joseph that is also in the comments. He's multitasking there. Okay, guys. Okay, what does it make something cinematic? Because I definitely want to talk a little bit about. Okay, we don't have that crazy depth of field, but for example, Soderbergh, he did what was the name of the movie? Something.
I don't remember.
Not Unconscious, but it's a film about someone that's pretty crazy, and
I like the description.
Yeah.
and
my wife always says, "Tell me what the movie's about in one sentence or less." I'm like, "Well,
oh, there you go."
I'll call you next time.
And he also did a Netflix TV show about basketball player. I don't know if it was a TV show or a movie. Now I can't recall, but I started watching and really wasn't bad. It was taking me a little bit out of the story because I knew that was on an iPhone, so I was like over-analyzing everything. But I'm pretty sure that most people that watched that...
Yeah, you knew.
Yeah, so, I mean, I knew in advance. If I would have watched that, I would have asked myself, like, what's going on? It's just because I'm super overly critical about what I watch. So, for example, when I see footage from Alexa 65, a lot of times I actually can recognize that's an Alexa 65. And you can say, whoa, how is it even possible? I mean, watch Altered Carbon. It's just gorgeous. All the imagery there, and like everything about that TV show is great. But
it goes back to what Joseph was saying. I mean, you look at the examples that Apple showed us yesterday at the announcement, and yes, they're using this new iPhone, but there's a ton of money and talent in front of the camera. It was lighting and composition and pre-planning, and I think what's going to happen more and more is it's going to come down to storytelling. Now, I hate when I'm on a thread about a camera, like a Blackmagic group, and then the one guy comes in saying, none of this matters, it's only the story. Well, that's not true at all. I mean, you need it to sound good, you need it to look good. I mean, these things are important. But
sure.
Once more and more people have access to these amazing tools, I mean, think about what iPhone or an Android, what smartphones will be in 10 years. It's going to smoke what the most expensive camera we have now is. Once everybody can deliver that quality, what's the differentiating factor? It's the story. It's
right.
So,
thank you very much for bringing that subject up, because I was hoping that at some point we would touch into that, because a movie should be about the story, right? I mean, just putting a sequence of slow motion videos with a great color grading one after the other is not going to make a story. And I know that a lot of friends of mine, they watch videos like that is this postcard of my trip, and they're like, oh yeah, beautiful video, but what was it about? I mean, really, this is just the places that you've been. Yeah, it's beautiful, it's nice to watch. Bradedimus is saying here, it's Unsane, the name of the movie from Soderbergh. And hello from Chicago there, Ikimagu. Okay. Story. I don't think anyone can deny that. So if you can capture light, and if you can tell a story, you have a movie. Mm-hmm. That's filmmaking, right? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's good storytelling and there's bad storytelling.
Well, okay, then we're getting to what's a good movie and a bad movie, but still a movie, right? I mean, you get.
Well, it has to do with craft, I think. I mean, the reason I haven't made another movie is because I'm alone. I can't direct and be behind the camera and do the lighting and the audio recording, and each of those roles is done by somebody who's perfected a craft. And I think it's the combination of all these elements that create cinema.
But you can do that all yourself. It's harder, but that is what a lot of more successful YouTubers are doing. The ones who are vlogging and have made a career out of that. Someone like Casey Neistat is an example. He is doing all of that. Occasionally, sure, he's got some help. But a lot of those, Peter McKinnon, he's only recently started to have someone who's following him around with a camera. The majority of their work was done on their own, and they had to do everything. They had to be the cameraman, the director, the actor, the sound guy. They had to do everything, the editor, everything. And that, to develop that skill set, is awesome. Now, no, of course, you're not going to go out and shoot a feature film where you are everything, but
you could. But
well, I guess you could. Sure.
If there's a certain level of quality you want to achieve, you need to have support.
Sure, Absolutely, absolutely. But you can start, and you can certainly create something, even if you are on your own.
Yes, absolutely. There shouldn't be an excuse.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so maybe we are in agreement that it doesn't matter what you're shooting on. It can be filmmaking.
Well, yes. Okay. To answer that question, yes. It doesn't matter what you're shooting with, what hardware you're using. If you are assembling a compelling story that people actually want to watch, and it's interesting and emotional, and whatever else you want to get out of it, then yes, that's a film. I'm not going to not call it a film because you shot on an iPhone, it's no longer a film. That's ludicrous. Yeah. To say that you have to have a particular set of gear to be able to make a film, well, that's just silly. As long as you got a camera, that's all that you actually have to have is a camera. And you kind of can't make a movie without that. But that camera could be an iPhone, and off you go.
And there is an interesting comment here from KB. I don't know now which argument he is referring to because I am a little bit slow on reading the comments. But he says, back in the day, people said that you needed to shoot in 35 millimeters if you wanted to end up in the theater. But people shot in 16 millimeters, and they still made it. Yep. So yeah, it's all about the end product. And then he goes on later on, is like, what matters is the final product, is about the story. So if it's compelling, if it connects to people, and this is something that we keep on forgetting, I think maybe in this age of YouTube and everything being so accessible, is that one way or another, your movie needs to connect with people. People need to connect with your movie.
What about an animation or a Pixar film? It wasn't shot on any camera.
There you go.
Right. Yeah,
It was still a compelling story.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, I want to add something to the topic of the gear itself. You look at something like an iPhone and you compare it to a bigger camera, whether you're talking about a DSLR level camera or a full film camera, whatever. Of course, there are limitations to what the camera can do. There's no question about that. But when you understand the gear and you understand its limitations, you learn to work within that and to work around that. And that's a huge part of it. And you look at the sample footage that we saw in the keynote yesterday, that film that was kind of the noir film style, it was very dark, lots of crushed blacks. That film looked beautiful. But also those shadows had zero detail. They were crushed. And that was intentional because the camera is not going to reproduce shadow detail in low light very well at all. It's just going to be a noisy mush. Okay, that's fine. So you know that. And so you shoot in a way that you're going to crush your blacks in post, and you're going to make sure that is pure black and it looks super beautiful because it's high contrast. It's you don't see any noise. It looks amazing. But I guarantee it was shot intentionally to come out that way.
Yeah, if you're shooting RAW, yes, in RAW, in post, it gives you more latitude to manipulate the image, blah, blah, blah. But while you're shooting, it's a little bit more forgiving. So yeah, you could shoot for the highlights and get more of the midtones and shadow detail at the same time just because you've got that gradation. If you have less of a dynamic range, you can still shoot the scene. You just have to choose which parts of that range are more important to you. Right. That's not new because of the iPhone 11.
Right.
That's been the case since the first camera ever.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And talking about dynamic range, I love this. Talking about dynamic range, there is smart HDR or HDR on video on iPhone at 60 frames, at 4K 60 frames. So imagine that you have that HDR, but that's on the camera, the normal camera application from iPhone. Now, do that on Filmic Pro, which they have their log. So you put their log together with the Smart HDR that gives you more or less some 14 stops or something like that. And it might be even more. You guys can correct me there if you want. Doesn't that give you so much flexibility? I mean, let's start thinking about what came out this yesterday. You guys can see there on the screen, these are the iPhone Pros that you can see, like there is golden, very sexy green, actually, honestly. That green is really not bad. And I'm not a very big fan of green. Okay, let's talk about Filmic Pro. Let's talk about Filmic Pro together with the iPhone. First,
maybe because you use Filmic Pro if you want to get more out of what the iPhone gives natively.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about what the new iPhone gives us natively first.
Okay, so let's start with this phone has 4 cameras. It has a front-facing camera that can record 4K. It has 3 cameras in the back. One that's an equivalent to 13 millimeters, one that's an equivalent to 26 millimeters, and one that's equivalent to 52 millimeters on a full frame. So that thing of choice of lenses, suddenly you have that thing of very good types of fields of view to choose from. And in a lot of times, for example, when you buy a kit of lens, the kit of lens comes with what? A 14 millimeter, 24, a 35, a 50, 85, 100, and 135. But then those kits are huge, and they cost a lot of money, but give you a lot of flexibility as well. So you have a very not bad kit with 3 cameras coming from the phone.
But isn't it kind of like a zoom lens where you can only choose 3 specific focal lengths?
Yes. Well,
To be native, to be optical, yeah. Anything in between is a digital zoom. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, is it? I mean, that's the part where I think that people keep on saying, "Oh, when Apple is going to innovate or not." We're gonna need to wait and see. But there are a few things on the API, and I think there's some patent as well. Normally, you get a normal camera and you shoot 4K, and you say, okay, I'm gonna shoot 4K so I can finish in 1080. So then I can reframe, right? And maybe I can even fake that I have a second angle. So I have like a wider shot, and then I punch in on the person's face, and then I have a nice close up. Now with the phone, you can actually have, and the fact that you can actually record, we're going to get there, but we can record 2 cameras at once. You can actually have one wide camera in 4K and the other close up in 4K. So you're reframing that you see both at the same time.
So if you contrast that to what we do currently, which is, for example, if you got an HD delivery and you shoot in 4K, in post you can crop in.
Yeah.
The difference you're saying is with an iPhone, if you crop in, you're still at 4K.
Yep. Because you're getting the feed from from the second camera, and it's just crazy. And Apple, or actually in this case Filmic, they were showing guides showing just this part here of the image is what you're gonna be seeing with the telephoto. This part here is what you're gonna see with the middle camera, with the wide, and this one with the super wide. And you see all of them together at the same time in the same shot, and it looks like it's coming just from one camera. So they are doing a lot of nice blending there at the same time.
Do you choose which angle you prefer, or is it recording all 3 simultaneously?
So that's where we need our questions to be answered, because first of all, on the native camera app, you can be recording on one lens, and then you can zoom out using a slide. So it zooms out, like very similar to what the movie 300 did. 300 was recording 2 cameras side by side, one in one focal length and the other one in a different focal length, and then in post they were zooming in and out. Yeah, I was watching the behind the scenes. That's just amazing. That's cool. And now you can actually have that thing. So, but with the native camera app, you can do that live, not in post.
Right.
And what Filmic did is that you can record both at the same time. Now you're not zooming in and out from them; you're cutting. So there is the native camera app doing zooming in and out, and it looked from the demos very seamless. It's so you're going from one feed of 4K to another feed of 4K, all of them optical. So it's definitely going to be a good task to put a phone in front of a chart and go step by step on that zoom to see where things fall apart, because there is so much computational cinematography that's happening right there.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how seamlessly it really transitions. And everything we've seen, it looks great, but obviously we're just seeing someone go wee, wee, wee back and forth. Yeah, I want to see when you get really close to it and you go slowly, do you see that shift as it shifts from one camera to the other? Because it is a different physical position. So, of course, the angle of view has changed very, very slightly, but it has changed. So, they say that they're doing it as seamless as they can. It'd be very interesting to see how good that really looks, how clean that transition is. And if it's totally invisible, totally seamless, that's phenomenal. That is really, really interesting.
Yeah, for example, the question is like, if you stop your zoom slide in between 2 lenses, is it blending both at the same time, or is it getting from one and punching in, doing something
I'm sure
digital?
It's punching in. I can't imagine it's blending both, but hey, maybe.
Yeah,
that's actually really interesting.
That's the type of thing that it's so mind blowing at the moment, and I see that there are a lot of comments going on right now. Let me check them out. KB was actually Teddy. He was agreeing with Gabriel about the storytelling before. Eugene, actually, there's a specific visual static to iPhone footage, the same as with Red and all the other cameras, right? It's up to the stakeholders, the DP and the director, to decide on creative choices. Yeah, I would agree. For example, you decide to go for Red or Airy because of the way they look. They are all great cameras, but there is something about that the image that you're getting, and they shoot raw, right? So in one way or another, you have super flexibility to do whatever you want there. And there is more from Eugene. Capturing multiple angles simultaneously is going to be a big journalism and reality TV tool.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know, you guys know Philip and Greg from Intelligent Assistant.
Yep.
And they used to have this, I think they were putting on YouTube, lunch with Philip and Greg. So they would set up several GoPros around the table, and they would have lunch with a guest, and they would be talking, and they can cut in between all of those. Imagine that now you can just put the iPhone right in the middle of the table, like if it would be a 360 camera, and you have these angles, but it's not 360.
Someone else commented about the fact that there's a rear and a front-facing camera, and you can record both simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that is, at first glance, really cool. Because, for example, if I'm interviewing somebody and I've got the iPhone, I can film them and me, or two subjects, whatever. It gets to be pretty complicated, though, because you are limited. They have to be exactly 180 degree from each other, and you have to be really lucky to make sure that their background's as good looking as his or her background.
But that's blocking. That's normal blocking that we would normally do anyway, right?
Well,
I mean,
exactly. Just set it up.
Except you could take the rear facing and the front facing at different angles, whereas with an iPhone, they're directly across, obviously. So it's a bigger challenge is all, but the fact that you can do it at all is really cool.
Yeah. I'm curious because we're seeing that we can record 2 feeds at once. Why not record all 4 at once? It must just be a processor limitation. So, will the iPhone 12 be powerful enough to allow us to record all 4 at once? Why is it limited to just 2? So,
I mean, and on Filmic Pro, the recording was limited to 2, but you could see the feed from all 4 cameras at once.
Exactly.
And you would choose 2 of them to record. And
which tells you it's got to be a processor thing.
Yeah, I can imagine it, because it's 2 different feeds from 2 different cameras that is doing the smart HDR as well. So what the smart HDR is doing, let's say that is recording at 60 frames a second. In each frame, or actually in each, how can I explain this? Yeah, in each frame, the phone is taking multiple exposures on those microseconds apart in each frame. So it's doing that multiple exposures 60 times a second. And it's doing that in 2 different cameras and recording and giving you the visual feedback of how it looks with all of those images blended in. Wow, it's,
we don't know exactly how it's doing the multiple, the more depth, the more HDR, the more dynamic range. We don't know if in video, if it is truly multiple exposures that are being blended, which of course would mean that you could risk some type of weird blurring between frames, or is it the sensor itself? Is the sensor capturing simultaneously? Are there photo sites for each photo site? Is it divided into smaller photo sites that are capturing a higher and lower exposure and blending it together? We don't know exactly how that's working, but the fact that it's doing it is pretty cool.
But isn't that what makes it so amazing?
Oh, of course. It really is.
Isn't this innovation? I mean, in my opinion, it is. But
totally,
Gabriel, I see that you're about to say something there.
Oh, I wasn't, but I can.
You weren't. Okay, so I'm gonna. I can read a question here. Ikimagu. That's the only cool thing I saw that was innovative from the new iPhone was filming 2 cameras at the same time, especially the front and the back. That's what the comment that you were talking about, right? And then Ashok said, looks like they're recording 2 streams simultaneously. 2 questions. 1, how is the phone handling it that resolution? Man, that is what Apple has that is incredible, is the chips that they're doing. Yeah. Those things are just crazy powerful. And how is the audio being recorded? Great question. I can imagine that if you're using both cameras, the front and back, you can be activating all microphones from the phone. At this point, this iPhone has at least 2 microphones. It might have a third one. And
I think the video quality is much more up to task than recording professional audio with the iPhone.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if we talk about like doing a film and using an iPhone to film, I would still use an F4, an F8, or a sound recorder to do
100%.
external sound. I mean,
Yeah.
let's not overcomplicate
Or you shoot a
it.
silent film and just put voiceover and music on it. That's totally legit as well.
Oh, good point. You could do a music video, for example. Normally, you have a music video that the track has been recorded already in studio. There is some more here, and the second question was, how is the audio recorded? Yeah, we went through that. And Scott saying, did they leave the optical stabilization in each of the lenses? No. The wide lens, the widest lens does not have optical image stabilization. On the slides, there was cinematic stabilization, which is the software one, but doesn't have the optical one. And on iPhone 7, 8, and 10, that makes using a gimbal like the DJI Osmo Mobile useless, as the OIS fights against the gimbal, resulting in jello.
So you can turn off the OIS in an app like Filmic. Filmic will allow you to disable that. So that's, if you're running into that, Scott, then you want to download Filmic for sure. Check that out, because that will let you disable it. I don't know. I see that Jack Isaac is saying the exact same thing. You can turn it off in Filmic Pro. So, yeah, I don't think you can do it natively, but the software does let you do that. So.
Okay, so...
sorry, I want to go back. So,
yeah?
Ashok had asked about the audio. One thing that was very interesting that we don't know, because we haven't played with it yet, if you are recording front and rear camera, the phone obviously has multiple microphones as well. Are you going to get the front camera microphone and the rear camera microphone recorded separately? That'd be very interesting, right? I would love to see that, because if you are doing an ad hoc interview and you are recording the front and the rears because you want to have you and your subject, and you don't have an external mic and you're just going to use the iPhone mic, how good is it? Does it give you some separation?
Yeah, and is there an issue with phasing? Because both mics are going to capture both people. So.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
We don't know.
Which brings us to another point here that is also related to more post-production, is, okay, if they're capturing both cameras at the same time, is this going to be 2 separate files, one from each camera, or are we maybe looking to a potential future in which one container will have several streams of video, or namely, one file will be a multicam?
Sure.
It's recording a live multicam clip where there's no need to sync and post, and there's no need for time code, at least from that one source, because they were all recorded at the exact same time. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and imagine, for example... Oh, yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Oh, no, I was just... do we know that it's doing that, or are we assuming? Yeah, we don't know yet.
No, yeah, we don't know yet. So that's just the question that I'm raising, because if suddenly we are seeing a one file that has 2 video streams, that for me, it's in the post-production side, makes it very interesting to think about where we can go with that. Imagine you have a normal studio, a broadcast studio, and you have the feeds from 4 cameras. That would be a software. You could have a little machine that would just put everything in one, like this, in one file. Like the F4 and the F8 records a polyphonic sound, so you have 8 tracks in one file.
Yeah.
Why not with video?
Sure.
They will always be
it would be
synced.
very cool.
And because an iPhone, there is the real-time time code. And if you synchronize your actual cameras with a tentacle sync that also synchronizes with real-time time code, suddenly it's so easy to synchronize everything.
Well, what about live cutting? Like, for example, I've got my Pocket 4K running into my computer via USB. So you're seeing my camera. But if that camera could record 2 angles simultaneously, what's to say I couldn't just click a button and cut from the wide to the close-up live from the same source?
Yeah, if you're live streaming from the iPhone, even today, depending on what app you're using to live stream, you can switch between cameras while you're shooting live, just like you can while you're shooting. Yeah, I mean, just like you can while you're recording video right now, you can switch cameras. The jump is not clean, but you can switch between them. And so live streaming, if you're going to use an app to live stream from the iPhone directly, and even if you don't want to do a picture-in-picture, but heck, why not? Live stream with a picture-in-picture or a split screen like I'm seeing of you guys right now, or whatever the case may be, that would give you an incredible amount of flexibility, especially if you start using a separate device to do the control, right? You've got your phone nicely stabilized and locked in, and then you're from another device making the camera angle switching. Why not? It was one of the funny things I thought was hysterical in the video yesterday at Apple when they were showing the iPhone on this huge what do you call it? A slider. She was the girl was
on the crane.
On the crane. She's on the crane, and it's all stabilized, and she's reaching up and touching angles, but every time she touched the camera moved. I'm like, no, you can't do that. That is not okay. I thought it was pretty funny. It made a great demo, but I'm like, yeah, you're not going to do that. You're not going to touch it like that. And I know, having recorded and wanted to touch on the camera, whether it's to change focus or something, you're like this. You're like, just touch. Okay, whew, got it. Didn't move the camera.
Yeah, but that's one thing that's also very interesting is you can have an application, for example, like Filmmaking, and you have a side application on your watch that you could be doing that, or you could have a second phone that you could be changing those angles, right? I can imagine here, once in a while, I'm recording music videos, and I think I'm going to reach out to one of the bands that I work with, and I'm going to say, hey, let me do one video for you, but we're going to challenge ourselves creatively speaking. I'm going to get this iPhone, and I'm going to be recording the widest, the super wide and wide lens together at the same time. If I do 5 takes, I actually have 10 choices that I can use there. And I really want to see how this is going to help me in post, how this is going to actually help me during the shoot, if it's going to suddenly decrease the amount of time that I'm spending shooting. Because if it will decrease, maybe I should consider in the future using 2 cameras that have autofocus and put them side by side on a little gimbal and record them with different focal lengths.
Well, that makes me think about. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead. No, I was just saying there's so many options. It's incredible. Please.
Yeah, it is. It makes me think about what we touched on earlier, which is, for example, if somebody hired you to go to a shoot and you were previously bringing 30 grand worth of gear, and then the next time you show up with an iPhone and a couple lights, are they going to pay you the same rate? Is it a perception thing, or is there a legitimate reason why they should pay you less for that? I can just, a little bit in my own head, although I talked about that earlier, but I can hear half the industry being really threatened by this new technology.
Sure.
It's that thing about putting a matte box in front of your camera and a shoulder rig and everything to make it look big, because it's bigger, the more professional it is, right? I think maybe you can even try saying, oh, do you know that video that you actually found me for? Yeah, it was filmed on an iPhone as well. You're here for my skills and how I do my job, not for the camera that I'm using. But I know, I don't think I would have the guts to appear on a commercial shoot, or even if it's just an interview, a sit-down interview or anything like that, with just an iPhone.
At least not in 2019. Where are they going to be in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, you don't know. I want to share a personal story about that, shooting with a lesser, smaller camera. I was doing a shoot for a client here in the studio, and normally I'd be using a much larger camera, but I had my hands on the Leica monochrome. If you've seen that camera, it shoots only black and white. It's an incredible camera, but it's also very small. It's a tiny little Leica. And I was still shooting with my studio lights, but obviously I was doing black and white portraits, and I chose to use that camera. And at some point, I out of nowhere, I just became very self-conscious of the fact that I was holding this itty-bitty little camera instead of a standard big DSLR. And I turned to the client and I said something like, I just realized, I'm shooting with this little camera. I don't want you to think that I'm shooting with some junky little point and shoot thing. This is actually it's a Leica. It's a really good camera. It just happens to be very small. And he looks at me and he goes, I don't care what you're shooting with, as long as we get good pictures. And it was that kind of realization of, okay, they hired me because of my work. They hired me because they knew the result that I was going to give them. What I show up with on set shouldn't matter. Now, obviously, there is still a perception. If you're a wedding photographer and you show up with a Canon 20D, and meanwhile the father of the bride is shooting with this $8,000 Nikon D, whatever the heck, it's that does seem a little bit off. But at the same token, you go, look, you hired me because I make good work. This is what I make great work with. If you don't like my work, then we can talk. But you hired me, you're getting good work. End of discussion.
Yeah, and I think as professionals, that's what we need to learn. And I think a lot of us are in different levels of doing that. A lot of us, even with a lot of experience, we're in different levels of even knowing how to ask people, how to charge people for our work. We are afraid of charging too much, or and then we say a price and they say yes. And then you're like, oh, that yes came too fast. I should have charged more, right? It happens. Or they say great, and then they never come back to you. I don't know.
After the announcement yesterday, I was in a pretty heated discussion with a friend of mine. He took issue with Apple calling it the iPhone Pro. And while at first take it's a little goofy maybe because we don't typically think of iPhones as being pro gear. But I did mention Sam Essman and his program, We Make Movies, and how he's teaching kids how to use iPhones and things like that to get the expensive gear out of the way and just focus on telling a story. And I think more and more that's going to happen because everybody has a phone and lots of people have ideas. Most people, I would argue, have ideas and stories that they want to tell. So why should we poo-poo that just because we've built our careers on these more expensive gear? It kind of makes me think about
it lowers the cost of entry.
It does, which happened for us. I mean, I was only able to get into this because of digital video. Before that existed, it would have taken way more money than I ever had, and I'd be working in restaurants still. I mean, it's happening to the next generation, so we can't take for granted the good things that were given to us and the same things happening down the line.
Yeah, look at the Canon 5D Mark II, right? That was the first DSLR that shot video. Vincent Lafray made a short film on it. It blew up. The industry went, oh, WTF. Like, this was huge. And suddenly a whole new generation of filmmakers were born. People who could not possibly afford an ARRI or any of these other big cameras, but heck, I can afford, $10,000 worth of a camera body, a couple of lenses, some lights. Like, that's much more reasonable. I can afford that. But now it's gone down to the $1,000 level, literally, right? The new iPhone's $1,000. You can have this incredible camera for $1,000. And of course, you can shoot incredible stuff with an iPhone that came out several years ago. You can spend $500 or $300 on a used one and still have that tool. So that barrier of entry is so much lower. And it doesn't mean that someone who gets an iPhone today and learns to shoot, learns to be a filmmaker, is going to shoot with the iPhone for the rest of their lives. Please. No. They are going to grow their gear as they grow their skills, but at least they can start. That 10-year-old kid can make a movie now, and that's insane. That's just awesome.
It's kind of just different levels of arrogance. I mean, I've got, like I said, a Blackmagic camera. So arguably that's better quality currently than an iPhone. Sure. But, it's a cinema camera, which is, again, goofy because cinema is all what happens in front of the lens. But you've got an ARRI shooter will look down on my Blackmagic the same way a Blackmagic shooter looks down on an iPhone. It's just different levels of snobbiness, I think. And yes, you can achieve different levels of quality with each device. But unless you're independently wealthy or you've got a long career that enabled you to get that gear and that clout, you're doing the best you can with what you've got. Yeah. And I don't think we should discourage people from starting out just because they can't afford $80,000 cameras.
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting comments here as well that I wanted to read. One is a question from Terje. Are we expecting better bitrate?
Yes, of course we are.
No, we want. Yes, we want. But
out of the new iPhone?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So Filmic lets you vary the bitrate, and it has its own Filmic Pro bitrate, and all of their bitrates are variable. I know that from doing some training on Filmic. It's all variable. And they're kind of Filmic Pro, whatever. I remember when I was doing the training on it, I was talking to the company and trying to get some numbers so I could say, oh, when you shoot a Filmic Pro, you're shooting at X megabit. And they said, well, it's variable. It's basically the best that you can get out of it. And I'm imagining it's the same thing here. If you go to the Filmic Pro codec, I forget exactly what it's called, but if you go for their top bit rate, it's still going to be variable. Is it going to be any better? It's going to be better because the sensor's better. I don't know if it's going to actually be a higher bit rate or not. But I guess we'll have to see.
What about the built-in from the camera? The camera app.
Built-in one's pretty low. It's pretty low, but I mean, obviously it looks great, right? And we've all seen video footage that's just shot on a regular iPhone camera. You're like, geez, that's incredible. But if you get the higher bit rate, then you do get a little bit more flexibility in post.
Yeah, a comment here from Eric. Use MicMe for audio. Yeah, I have seen that mic before. It actually looks very pretty. seems to be very light. Joseph, have you come across that mic at all?
I've come across. I haven't used it. I think the company reached out. They wanted me to do a video on it a while ago, but then the mic never showed up. So I don't know. It's one of those discussions that went nowhere. It looks like interesting stuff, but I don't know that much about it. I have to. In fact, when you guys talk about it, I'll pull it up again and take another look.
I remember there is like a gold version, a silver version, and it seemed interesting. I would like to try, but I'm not in the level of companies be sending me equipment to to check them out. There is another comment here from Mud Daigun. It's very interesting to try to read.
Muddy Gun. Yeah. See, yeah. It's very interesting to try to read these names or whatever handles online. I'm the worst one with that. But anyway, I could see some great argument dialogue being done by recording front and rear cameras, even with your music video. Maybe a two-singer band or something that the talent would feel more into the scene. Yeah, I totally can see music videos being done that way as well, inclusive, and that was one of the examples. They were actually doing a conversation between the musicians, but that was what they were showing on stage. And I think the fact that you just have the possibility of doing that, and the front camera now is 4K as well, I think it definitely opens up for creativity. And I think we're going to start seeing in the next few weeks people coming up with very interesting stuff. And then suddenly we're going to have that discussion again, like, wow, it really doesn't matter what you're using, because look at the amazing stuff that we're seeing. I've seen YouTubers like Potato Jet doing comparison of Red and an iPhone. And after you color grade, no, honestly, yeah, right. Because you're going to still color grade and you're still going to do all your post-production work. After all of that, most people can't tell the difference. An actual normal person that's not a video professional will not know the difference. We are professionals. We are like 40-60% of who is right there. It's very interesting to see this on YouTube. And with the YouTube compression, oh my God, it finishes killing your image anyway. Yeah.
So,
right.
I mean, have you ever seen videos of water moving, like a surface of a lake moving on YouTube? It's just ridiculous. You can't see anything. The slow-mo guys, they put a video of gallium, which is in liquid form, on a speaker, and the gallium starts moving a lot and is very reflective. The compression from YouTube completely ruins everything. You can't see a single thing in there, only if they stop the frame, basically, for us to take a look how it looks.
It's an argument for Vimeo.
Yeah.
Here's a question / speculation. So given that Apple has and again, if we've been with Apple this whole time, I don't think this is news, but there's a new commitment to pros. You know, you've got the iMac Pro, you've got the Mac Pro coming out. You've got Apple now creating content with Apple TV+. You've got their camera technology in these smartphones. Do either of you think Apple has any plans currently to release a Pro camera down the road?
I think they could buy Red.
Yeah, well, they could buy half the countries on the planet. But
they could buy most small countries, yes.
But it's a serious question. I mean, do you think they'd have any interest in that? I mean, true, most of their products are consumer products, but they're already giving consumers a lot of power with this new iPhone 11 as far as photo and video quality. I'm not saying that a pro-level camera would be the next logical step. It's just it's pure speculation, but they've got their hands in all these different creative production avenues. I mean, they have the delivery with Final Cut 10. They've got the codec capture with ProRes RAW.
And now they have the distribution. And now they have the distribution with Apple TV Plus.
So why wouldn't they create a camera, their own camera, that can capture ProRes RAW?
Some would say that these are signs that something can happen at some point in time. But it's very nice to see Joseph smile there. He's like, just give like a half smile.
I don't see that happening. I mean, certainly, I absolutely see your argument, and never say never. It's Apple. They clearly have the money to do whatever the heck they want. But I I don't see that happening. It's a tough, low margin business.
Okay, I would argue that they are one of the biggest camera manufacturers anyway right now.
Oh, yeah,
Look
they are,
at the
absolutely.
amount of cameras that come out from Apple on iPhones and iPads, and they are not bad right now.
I agree that an Apple Pro, quote unquote, camera would have a very small piece of their overall market. But I would argue the same thing with Final Cut Pro 10 or the new Mac Pro. Yet they're still producing that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but it would be even smaller. I mean, considerably smaller.
that's true.
Yeah, I think at Apple, a company like Apple, when you're that big, you don't develop $1 million ideas or even $100 million ideas unless it's worth a couple billion. Then it's just no point. It really isn't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the company to do. And I'd have a hard time believing that they would do that. I'm much more likely that they will just continue to innovate on the iPhone side and develop, as far as we know, and I don't think we know this, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't know where they get their sensors, or do we?
I
I don't think they're making their own.
I think in the past they used to be Sony, and then there was another company. I completely lost track of that right now. But there is actually a very funny commentary here from Eugene. Do you guys remember the red hydrogen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to make cameras that small, and it's not easy to make the software, right? Okay, we are nearing the top of the hour. We have been live for about an hour here, and like I said in the beginning, we could be talking about this for like 12 hours. There is so much that we can talk about here, but we need to go at some point and let you guys all move on with your lives. And everyone that has been watching, thank you very much. Gabriel, where can people find you in case they want to get in touch with you?
You could go to my website, aceenterprises with a Z.com. Otherwise, on Twitter, it's ace_enterprises, and then Facebook, Gabriel Spalding.
The Photo Joseph, how can people reach out?
Photo Joseph everywhere. Photo Joseph on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course on YouTube. Please subscribe and hit the bell.
Well, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of this discussion. It was definitely a pleasure. It's always great to have smart people to talk about this. And thank you for all the smart people that have been watching, giving likes, subscribing to the channel, and commenting there. I will be at IBC during the weekend at the Hedge booth. I'm going to be doing demos for PostLab, which is an application that lets you have versioning control on the cloud of your Final Cut Pro 10 libraries, and you're able to share those libraries with other people. So check it out. And also, check it out, the article that's coming out tomorrow from Sam Massman on FCP.co. You guys should definitely read that. There is more information about the iPhone and what things that you should consider for mobile filmmaking. And with that, that's all. Guys, thank you very much. I hope you have a nice day, and I see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.